Hello and welcome to the Doctors Who Read Stuff. My name is Chris.
I'm Chip.
And I am Brian.
And today we're covering the second half, which is probably like the second, like the last third of A Grain of Truth, which is a second short story in the book entitled The Last Witch by Andrzej
The
Sapkowski.
last,
Did
the
I?
last wish. You said last witch.
Well,
Which
yeah,
wish?
I've heard it both
yeah.
ways.
Be a lot different if the story was the wisher.
The Wisher. Yes.
I
I wish for things.
And they come true.
So last time when we talked about how Geralt came across this monster who basically wasn't really a monster. He was a boy who was cursed at a very young age, and through a series of bizarre events, came to be in the company of a Rusalka named Vereena.
Is she a Rusalka? I thought that he figured out that she was something
Not
else
yet.
by the end.
I'm just
But
recapping.
So,
We're not
well,
there yet.
we can talk
Yeah.
about that. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what they thought when we left our conversation
Right.
last week. But
Yes. So that was kind of a recap of what happened last time, and now we're on this time. So
yeah, so this is kind of like the culmination of everything. I honestly like the first two-thirds of this story better than the end. At the end, really, it gets to moving really fast here, and a lot of it is,
Mhm.
the battle between Geralt and
I
Vereena.
know. Yeah.
But I guess before we get to that, he leaves Nivellan's castle or keep or kind of whatever it was, and he kind of finds a place to camp. And I think he spends the night, and he hears like the screaming of a tortured woman through the night. And he sees like a fire off in the distance, and then the next morning he leaves, grabs Roach, rides to where that fire was, and all he finds is charred bones in a trampled glade that was kind of still warm with ashes. And then he sees something sitting in the crown of an enormous oak. Shield, it says, shrieked and hissed. It could have been a harpy or an ordinary wildcat, but the Witcher didn't stop to check. And then, it's basically that. Then he kind of goes on writing. Roach was drinking in a spring. They kind of came across these reddish mushrooms peering from the moss. And this is we kind of touched on this in the discussion last week. So that's why I was bringing it up. But this is where Roach gets kind of
spooked.
spooked, yeah. And the Witcher Geralt says, "You're becoming a real hysteric, Roach. This is just an ordinary devil's ring. What's all the fuss?" And it's just this ring of mushrooms peering from some moss. And the mayor kind of snorted and did some stuff. But then Geralt kind of said, "Yeah, animals like me. Sorry, Roach. It turns out you've got more brains than I do." Realizing that something was amiss. And kind of going with that whole idea that, Geralt's not really human anymore. He's probably more animal than human in some ways. But maybe, I think, Brian, you mentioned last time that, he's probably got more of an affinity for animals and things of that nature than, it really gets along with them better than humans anymore.
I had a different take on that sentence.
Mm.
Animals like me, he muttered. So if we go back to when Geralt and Nivellan are parting ways, Nivellan stroked Roach's nostrils and patted her neck. Roach, pleased with the caress, lowered her head. Animals like me, boasted the monster, and I like them too. So that was, to me, when Geralt said it in the wilderness, that was him recalling what Nivellan
Him repeating
said
it.
to him. And it's like, animals like me. Son of a gun. It's like something clicked in his head, and I don't know
Yeah.
necessarily what it is, but because this part confused
You're right.
me.
You're
Oh.
totally right.
I like that better. Again, when I read it, I read it even differently yet. It was like animals like me, like he was referring to himself as an animal who is just non-intelligent, who is just completely off base, not thinking.
You and
That's
me,
kind of the way I
baby,
read it,
ain't
too.
nothing
Okay.
but animals.
Yeah, it's basically whichever word of those three
We'll
that we
leave it there.
emphasize. So animals like me, animals
Yes.
like me, animals like me. Do yeah.
Yeah, just a couple different ways you could interpret that
Yeah.
sentence. That was an
Yeah.
interesting take. I almost wish I
Yeah,
knew
because I don't
Polish
know.
so I could read the original.
True. Yeah, I don't know if there's something that's lost in translation there, but I'm kind of with Chris too. I'm not sure what it was that
Yeah.
clicked.
That
It's
kind of confused me.
something clicked, and he headed back to Nivellan's manor.
Yep.
But what was
Yeah,
it?
so when he gets back there, Vereena's just like hanging out on this dolphin statue.
It's the dolphin fountain
Yeah.
statue thing.
Creepy.
And well, she's
Yeah.
singing, isn't
Yeah.
she? Or he can hear singing, but she's not. Her
Right.
lips aren't moving. But so is she casting a spell? Is she doing something to Nivellan at that point? Because Nivellan didn't come out until
Right.
later.
Well, it at least in my book, the E version, but the font was different whenever she said something.
Oh,
I almost wondered.
I thought maybe you're reading in the original Polish or something.
Nah, not this week.
Shakespeare in the
No.
original Klingon is, something.
Kapla. Boy, that would be fun. I would need to use Google Translate on literally everything.
Yeah.
So,
But my thought was, like, I don't know if she is, like, I don't want to say like either like a telepath of sorts, or if she is, because if her mouth wasn't moving but she was singing, she's either like a telepath or a crazy ventriloquist or just like such an oddity that you just can't see her mouth moving, like if she has two mouths or something like that.
She seemed a little like Mothra from Godzilla because she kind of had these like sonic powers that once she did like unleash them.
So,
Boy, that's a good callback too.
but this is about where he's like, because I think when he was out in the wilderness with Roach, he was like, "Oh, she's not a Rusalka. I figured it out."
Yeah.
And what he's talking to her, well, a couple.
And maybe that's what clicked with them, is that, oh, I know what she is, and I know what she's up to, or something.
But before he gets there, Sapkowski makes a point of noting that Geralt changes out his swords.
Yeah. So he's got this silver blade, doesn't he?
It's described as a shining, beautiful weapon with a cruciform and slender, well-weighted hilt, ending in a spherical pommel made of white metal. And then when he's confronting Vereena, he draws it and says it's silver. But he also says, "You're so like a Rusalka," he continued calmly, "that you could deceive anyone. All the more as you're a rare bird, black-haired one. But horses are never mistaken. They recognize creatures like you instinctively and perfectly. What are you? I think you're a Mula or an Alpor. An ordinary vampire couldn't come out in the sun." And this is where, like, she smirks a little. So like, she understands, right? It was kind of interesting. And so what I found out by reading this, and I'm wondering if this is a translation thing or if it's the words he chose to use, when he says, "All the more you're a rare bird," like, I think they're using birds as a term for women. Because even like two paragraphs down, he says, "You like birds, but that doesn't stop you from biting the necks of people of both sexes, does it?" So I don't know if that's a Polish thing. I don't know if that's a translation thing, but I thought it was interesting. So.
And I guess I don't know much about like Polish mythology or lore, but like, I assume that most of these, I'm guessing that a lot of the monster names haven't been, these are the original names or whatever the closest translation is, but I guess I don't know if a Rusalka or a Mula or an Alpor are typically a female creature.
Yeah.
Or if they're both. I don't know. I mean, that could be.
Don't know the distinction.
Yeah, but he finally...
Is it like a succubus or something that you would think is being typically a female demon of sorts? Or
maybe. But they do eventually
This
get
is
into their fighting, right?
Yeah.
And Geralt's basically getting his butt kicked.
Well, he basically calls her out and figures out what she is, and then
Yes.
they jump into the
Yeah.
fight,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Like when
Where
he when
you're
he
a,
when he
a
figures out she's a
Bruxa.
Bruxa, then she like
mhm.
gets all crazy.
Yeah,
Eventually turns into a
well, she
bat.
arches up her back, and then she screams, and that's when she,
Yeah.
like this sonic blast from her scream, the sound waves hit him like a battering ram and knock him down,
Yeah.
and then they kind of get into this fight, which I like the way his battle scenes are written, where it just it feels very organic and like
Mhm.
it's a good back and forth on both,
Well,
but I guess there's nothing really.
it's
They're exciting, but
I like that it is told from like his perspective. It's not like a
mhm.
third person retelling of the events. It's like from his perspective. So you get
Yeah,
like the
Mhm.
emotional impact, you get his thought process, you get those things, which I think
hmm
helps kind of make it less of an analytical breakdown and more of you.
yeah. It's not like a historical telling of a battle. It's
Right.
Mhm.
told from Geralt's
Yeah.
point of view,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
I like that too.
But he's about to get just chewed up when Nivellan does show up. And this is interesting. And this is
Yeah,
what's
well,
confused
there was
me.
a
Sorry,
point.
go ahead.
I was gonna say right before that happens, Geralt's waiting. He's got his sword ready, and he's looking at the creature's direction. And at the last moment, he jumped, not to the side but forward, dealing a swinging cut, which made the air howl, but he missed. And he usually doesn't miss. So, I, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. I mean, don't want to get
and
we
then
don't want to
the
get too analytical and we don't want to like retell everything
no,
step
but
by
it just
step. But no, that's it's good to know because
but I think
it,
that he missed, and he was kind of put in a position where she had the
yeah, he
advantage.
missed and then when he did strike a blow,
Mhm.
it barely phased her. So,
Yeah.
but she's clearly cleaning his clock, and Nivellan does show up, and this is the part where it's like, well, where was he? Because
hmm
earlier she was singing, and Geralt made the comment like, "Oh, if you're singing, you've had some blood." And then he asked where Nivellan was, and she didn't answer. So, was she
hmm
And I
feasting?
think the
I don't know.
well at this point, I think I think the author made a reference that all of the shutters were shut.
Mm-hmm.
So like when he got to the mansion, almost like almost like Nivellen was kind of thinking about things, or had been thinking about the words that the Witcher had said about the curse, or he had been thinking just about his current relationship, about how she might be a monster. Just I think he was having like when the mansion was closed off and all the shutters were shut, I'm wondering if that was like the introspection
Oh yeah,
of Nivellen of like, all right, now I'm called to do something. I feel like I have a resolution. I need to go act.
that could be.
So then once he showed up, that was like his ultimate decision was, I am going to finish this. I think, and I think this is, if honestly, if I can just keep going here for another minute,
hmm
I think the entitled A Grain of Truth, you wonder like how that title comes back into this. And I almost wonder if, despite their kind of like their head to head, you know, headbutting at the dinner table the night before, if there was some grain of truth that stuck with Novellin that kind of gave him enough of like momentum to kind of switch and realize that he didn't need the curse. He wanted to, end his relationship. So I almost wonder if that was like, I don't know, like all on Novellin's shoulders. Like if he was like just
Well,
so captivated.
it kind of taken that point. I mean, maybe it's that whole the monster talk, and where Geralt said repeatedly, you're not a monster, but
Hmm.
she is a monster, in the context of the story. So maybe Novellin realized that hey, I'm not a monster, but I need to do something about the monster that is present. But maybe I don't know. It's
Like I
interesting.
almost could see. Oh, you have a thought, Chris?
Well, I don't know about that. I was gonna make a comment that's like, that I like where you went, and when you're saying when they were like going back and forth at the dinner table, that struck me as more of like a chess match, like two people trying to feel each other out. It's like, okay, what's your game here? And I like that idea. It's like if everything is shut up, maybe he's in there trying to feel like, okay, what do I need to do? What's my plan? Maybe he doesn't. Maybe because everything's shut up, he doesn't even know she's out there or that he's back until they start fighting and he hears something. I mean, that could be it too.
The other kind of emotion that I was drawing from this, and I think like to kind of encapsulate what we're talking about even at a higher level, like the number of times, or if you guys have ever known, a friend who's going through like just in a bad relationship or whatever, and you go over there and you have that frank conversation with like, no, you're not a monster, the other person's a monster, you need to get out of that relationship, and then they have to think about it for a while, and then they have to ultimately make that decision.
Yeah.
So kind of a really interesting turn. It's like a really deep psychological moment for Nivellan.
Yeah. And I wondered too, though, if her singing had something to do with it too. That it was, I don't know if it had like some sort of a hypnotic
Like a
cast over
siren song
Nivellan or something like that just kind of had him subdued. And then once the battle began and the singing stopped, then Nivellan comes out. So I don't know. I think it's open for a lot of interpretation.
And I think that's kind of because these were written early 90s, right?
Early to mid 90s, somewhere.
And
93, 94.
yeah, so 90
about the same time that Disney's Beauty and the Beast came
original
out.
text 1993. So I wonder,
That would have been about right when Disney's Beauty and the Beast
Yeah.
came out, which I know Brian mentioned in the last
Right.
episode too, and I think there's a lot of elements of that here.
there are, because if we jump back real quick and we go back to the Nivellan coming out, and like he impales the Bruxa before she can bite Geralt, and like as Vereena's like trying to claw her way to Nivellan to bite him, Geralt finishes her off, but before she dies, she professes her love for him, which breaks the curse, and he's a man again. So yes, this is Beauty and the Beast, to Brian's point earlier. It absolutely is. It's a little twisted, but it's Beauty and the Beast.
And Beauty and the Beast is somewhat dark to begin with, but this is a little darker.
Good point.
Yeah.
This is a little darker, and this would be, if they made this into a movie, I'd be more inclined to see this than Disney's version.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But we were going back to just like some of the stuff that isn't like explicitly explained, and I think with the books that we've been reading that have been written in the last 10 or 15 years, we're used to that because that's kind of the trend. So
True.
if we don't get something that doesn't, or if we get something that doesn't explicitly call something out, we're like, whoa, hold on, what? So.
yeah, I mean, and when you think back to a lot of the books I grew up on, or not you guys, when I think back to the books I grew up on, but I assume some of them are the same ones you did, like the Lord of the Rings and Dune and some of those. They, Dune went into a lot more explanation of things, but not everything. Lord of the Rings didn't explain everything. There was a lot of mystery and, some supernatural stuff there that he never explained it, but it all worked, and it just left you kind of open to interpret things in the way that you wanted to, or that you chose to. So, but I like this.
Yeah, it was good. It was, and what I've read online is this is normally ranked like up there with these short stories of people's favorites. And
that was it.
We mentioned last time that they cast Tormund from Game of Thrones. I don't know what his real name is, but he's going to play Nivellan in season 2. So it'll be interesting to see where they take this, because as we found out from the last short story, they used elements of it, but they changed some things to make it work within the larger arc. So
Yeah, they did it more of a serialized drama series, so it was somehow fit the story into the larger narrative. But yeah, it will be interesting to see when they do, or what
Yeah,
they
it
do
is.
with it.
and then the next one that we're going to be reading is The Lesser Evil, which we'll be discussing next week. At least the first part of it. I didn't miss anything on this one, did I?
Awesome. I mean, just at the end, it's kind of like
Oh,
the almost the happy ever
yeah.
after, where things go back to normal.
And he has to explain that,
The Witcher
know,
leaves.
hey, it was true love that made you better. She actually did love you.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was like, he
Yeah.
got to be human. He's like, what happened? I don't understand. Because earlier when they were talking at the dinner table, and he was talking about how all these merchants' daughters, like, would sleep with him or whatever. He's like, well, I thought maybe that would cure me, but it didn't. It wasn't true love. So, very sweet, very romantic telling of a classic tale.
What does he talks about, I think in that first section too, he talks about all the dreams that he's having or that he has.
Geralt's?
No, Nivellan. And I think that he realizes at some point that Vereena may be the cause of some of those dreams
Yeah, I
too.
think
That
so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I forgot
Yeah,
about this.
so again, going back to, is her singing a way to kind of control him and maybe make him do things that he wouldn't normally do? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, like we talked about earlier, there's just a lot that can be left kind of open to interpretation.
This was a good read, though. I enjoyed this one.
I liked this one.
Yeah.
I like this one.
To your point, I did enjoy the first chunk better than the second. Just like building up, like the interactions between Nivellan and Geralt were very good, were very well written. So
Yeah, the verbal chess match, as he's put it.
yeah. Well, hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. We invite you to keep reading along with us. If you like what you've heard, you can subscribe, you can like, you can catch us every week on Wednesdays as we release new content. And with that, we'll see you next week.
How long?